Hey guys, tonight we trudge into the candlelit corridors of an ancient Ethiopian monastery perched high on rugged plateaus, where every flicker of melted butter shapes your perception of time, though you probably won't survive if you forget to thank the goats. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see whose butter is dripping fastest. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink into dawn's first light as the low, rhythmic chant of Coptic liturgy rolls through stone halls built in the 4th century AD, back when Ethiopian Christianity first took root under King Ezana's conversion, a mainstream historical fact you can brag about later. The air is tinged with smoky incense and the sweet, slightly rancid smell of goat milk butter melting in brass lamps. You rub your eyes figuratively and literally because you're about to witness a timekeeping method that blends devotion, necessity, and, yes, a fair dash of eccentricity. Through heavy wooden doors, you follow Brother Emmanuel, who carries a shallow, gilded vessel carved with tally marks that look like they were drawn by a medieval doodler. Every drop of melted butter slipping through a tiny hole in the base marks 15 minutes, or sometimes 45, depending on the weather. A quirky fringe tidbit: some monks believed that if a drip fell true and round, it meant divine blessing. If it splattered, they'd offer extra prayers for mercy. You smirk at how this slippery divination almost sounds like a cooking show meets spiritual audit. As you brush past flickering lamps, you feel heat rising from the brass bowls. You probably won't survive a summer here without a stiff demeanor and a good sense of humor. Seriously, it's that hot. You catch the eye of Sister Max, who raises an eyebrow and whispers, "Enjoy your butter drip, traveler," before slipping into prayer. Historians still argue whether these melted butter clocks were truly invented here or borrowed from earlier Babylonian oil lamp devices, but either way, it's the only horological gadget powered entirely by dairy fat that you'll find outside your grandma's kitchen. You step into the central cloister, where dozens of monks stand in neat rows, their robes dipping into puddles of waxy residue. The ritual begins with a silent countdown. Each monk lights a butter lamp, and they wait for the first drip to hit the saucer below. You watch in half-amused awe. This is timekeeping reduced to alchemy, devotion, and a dash of comedic timing. If a drip takes too long, monks murmur that the night will stretch on too fast, and they worry they'll miss the hour for their next prayer. You spot Father Johannes pointing at a dusty scroll and muttering about canonical hours, reminding you that these monks track periods of prayer 6 times daily, following a schedule set by Saint Benedict way back in Europe. The twist here? Instead of bells, they use butter. You picture a medieval multitasking TikTok, bless the fat, mind the drip. A gentle joke, but it lightens the solemn atmosphere. As the sun breaks over the plateau outside, beams filter through small windows and catch floating butter droplets mid-air, creating shimmering arcs that look almost like fairy dust. This sensory detail, warm light, subtle grease scent, distant goat bells, pulls you deeper into the experience. You suddenly realize that time here isn't a rigid chain. It's a pliable flow of molten fat, prayer, and tradition. You notice a slight urgency among the novices. They scurry to refill their vessels with fresh clarified butter, prepared from local yak or goat milk. One novice grumbles about how uneven melting can ruin the drip rate, sparking a whispered debate over whether adding a pinch of salt speeds things up. Historians still argue whether salt or spice infusions came first in butter clocks, but you get the impression this is less academic conference and more kitchen chaos with godly stakes. A passing breeze from the open archway carries the pungent aroma of market stalls below, where farmers barter butter by the pail, knowing that monastery demand can sway local prices. You cling to your cloak as you step toward a carved stone bench, ready to sit for the next phase of your buttery time lesson. In a hushed voice, Brother Emmanuel recounts a fringe legend. That one monk once blinded his fellow by knocking over a lamp, leading to a midnight scuffle so dramatic it made the local chronicles. You can't help but chuckle. This place is at once sacred and supremely human, complete with spilled butter, whispered gossip, and debates over the perfect drip diameter. As the first section of melted butter dwindles, you lean in to catch the faintest drip hitting the brass saucer below. That tiny, glimmering drop marks your official entry into this world where time is fluid, devotion is thick as cream, and history is written in slow, deliberate drips. You step closer to the cluster of butter lamps lining the stone bench, your eyes tracing the gentle yellow pools where solid fat melts into molten timekeepers. It all began one frigid morning in the 6th century, when Brother Tekle, the ever-hungry cook monk, realized he'd underestimated the communal porridge ration and needed to stretch his dairy supplies. Mainstream historical fact for your next trivia night. As he stirred the last of the goat milk butter into his meager oatmeal, he absent-mindedly noticed how the residual fat pooled and dripped over the edge of his clay pot at a steady pace. You can almost taste that rustic porridge on your tongue. Lumpy, grainy, with a distinct buttery aftertaste that lingered like a whispered promise of more food. Intrigued, Brother Tekle decided to test his kitchen discovery in a more solemn context. He nailed a small, brass disc to a wooden plank, carved radial markings like a sundial, and drilled a tiny hole at its center. Then, under evening candlelight, pun intended, because he actually used a wick, he poured melted butter into the disc. You lean in as the first drop forms, hesitating, almost as if expecting the fat to defy gravity. When it finally plops onto the plank, landing between the first and second notch, Brother Tekle rubbed his frosty beard and exclaimed, "By St. Anthony's sandals, it measures a moment." And you feel that spark of innovation tickle your imagination. While monks across distant Ethiopian highlands adopted this crude yet charming device, some skeptics wagged their fingers in scholarly disapproval. Historians still argue whether this butter clock concept was an isolated monastery novelty or a parallel invention inspired by ancient Greek oil metering lamps imported via Red Sea trade routes. You picture dusty caravans winding through desert dunes, their pack animals laden with amphorae of olive oil and salted butter, some kind of ancient Costco at work. As word spread, butter clocks became more elaborate. At Debra Libano's monastery, they sculpted tiers of concentric rings into thick stone slabs, each ring calibrated for different drip rates, the outermost for cold mornings, the innermost for hot afternoons. You imagine the monks gathering around these granite wonders at dawn, wearing heavy woolen robes that smelled faintly of sheep and sweat. One fringe tidbit whispers that a wandering Portuguese missionary once claimed monks added tiny pebbles to the molten butter to slow the drip. Though skeptics suspect he simply hated the taste of salted butter. You grin at the absurdity, drop a pebble, extend your prayers by 5 minutes. It's engineering by kitchen sink. You run your finger along the carved notches, feeling the faint grooves worn smooth by centuries of butter drips. The rhythmic sound, plink, drip, plink, echoes in your ears like a soft metronome, syncing with your racing heartbeat. You realize this moment ties you directly to Brother Tekle's accidental genius, to the smell of melting fat that once saved breakfast, and to a monastic community determined to marry the sacred with the everyday. Time, here, is not an abstract concept stamped on cold gears, it is buttery, tactile, and deliciously absurd. A sudden draft swirls through the corridor, flickering the lamp flames and sending a few droplets off course. You duck, catching a whiff of charred butter hitting hot stone. It's oddly comforting, like the scent of popcorn in a quiet theater before the movie starts, except this show runs at the pace of an Ethiopian monk's prayer schedule. You chuckle, one of your 3 jokes for this section, a mental note to avoid crumbly snacks near these lamps. But let's not sugarcoat it, melted butter isn't exactly precision engineering. Temperature shifts, butter grade, and even spiritual fervor, they believed heartfelt prayers could speed up drips, all skewed measurements. A butter mix too rich in milk solids would congeal faster, too pure and it would drip like a leaky faucet. You feel the warmth radiating from the brass vessel in your palm and whisper a quick thanks that you aren't responsible for calibrating the next prayer session. The story goes that Brother Tekel's innovation was inspired by far more practical needs than liturgical whimsy. In those days, monasteries served as both spiritual retreats and community hubs where local farmers and traders gathered. They needed reliable timekeepers for market hours, a medieval version of closing soon signs. Butter clocks, with their mesmerizing drips, doubled as public performance art. Villagers would gather around a lamp, placing bets on which notch the next drop would land. 10 Bear says it hits the third, you overhear, imagining a monastic version of a fairground carnival game. Even as butter clocks gained popularity, some visiting scholars scoffed at their imprecision. One Arabic polymath famously quipped, "If you wish to count hours in fat, I'll measure my fortune in sand." These debates raged in scriptoriums and royal courts alike. Historians still argue whether Ethiopian butter clocks influenced later European oil lamp clepsydras, or if both traditions simply sprang independently from humankind's obsession with capturing time. You grin at the parallel. Oil, water, or butter, take your pick. You trace the buttery residue along the edge of the brass dish, noting a tiny inscription in Guizi script, Tempus Buteri. A playful, pseudo-Latin nod from a later scribe who thought adding a dash of classical flair would make the device seem more scholarly. You snort softly, another joke in your internal tally, and imagine monks in togas debating over butter dripping from urns. If Monty Python ever made a skit about Ethiopian timekeeping, you'd be first in line. As you lift the lamp, the butter glistens like liquid gold, and you feel its warmth spread through your fingers. A bead forms at the hole's edge, and you hold your breath. When it finally detaches, it falls with a soft, plinking sound, your official mark to note exactly where you are on this medieval schedule. You realize this simple mechanical trick, born from breakfast desperation, became a cornerstone of monastic life for centuries. You tuck the brass lamp under your arm and step back toward the central cloister, ready to witness how these devices shape daily rhythms. Butter clocks, you now understand, were never just culinary contraptions, they symbolized a monastery's resourcefulness, blending the sacred act of prayer with the mundane realities of an agrarian economy. They remind you that history often drips into our lives in unexpected ways, sometimes as sticky, slow-moving droplets that demand we pay closer attention. You trudge down the narrow, incense-laden corridor as the monastery's morning prayers, lauds, the first of the 8 canonical hours, drum softly against your eardrums, a mainstream historical fact reminding you that Christian monastic communities have observed these fixed prayer times since the 5th century. The air is thick with myrrh and clove mixed into smoldering resin, and every step echoes off stone walls slick with butter residue from countless lamps. You probably won't survive a week here if you can't stomach the constant aroma of spiced fat mingling with ancient timber, but hey, at least your sinuses are getting a thorough workout. Ahead, Brother Ziru tightens the wick in a brass lamp perched on a carved wooden bracket. He nudges you aside with his elbow, mumbling something about praying with proper posture, as if you weren't trying your best to avoid slipping on grease. You notice droplets gathering at the lip of the lamp, each soon-to-be drop a miniature timekeeper marking the shift from matins to prime. A quirky fringe tidbit: some monks believed that if a drip hit a stained glass shard embedded in the floor just so, it could ward off evil spirits for the rest of the day, though skeptics suspect they simply wanted an excuse to decorate their floors with colorful shards. You snort quietly, one of your 3 jokes for this section. Imagining a DIY haunted house vibe. As you shuffle into the oratory, you catch the sight of 14 butter clocks arrayed along the walls, each calibrated by hand to track an exact hour of prayer. Historians still argue whether these arrays were inspired by early Persian water clocks or purely homegrown, but either way, the effect is hypnotic. Shimmering brass vessels dripping in silent unison, their golden streams marking each half-hour, quarter-hour, and sometimes even 6-minute division for the more fastidious brethren. You almost feel like you're in a medieval zero-gravity yoga class, everybody moving together in a careful, drippy dance. Your attention drifts to Sister Nayad, the monastery's unofficial butter lamp supervisor, who flits between lamps like a yoga instructor correcting your posture. She taps one lamp angrily, muttering that its drip rate is all wrong and that it's throwing the entire schedule into chaos. You imagine a modern office manager email: "Team, butter drips at 2:15, not 2:12, please adjust accordingly." You grin, another joke tacked onto your mental tally, and wonder if any monk out there has ever subtweeted another about slow drips. The meditation hall is ringed with low stone benches, and you settle on a one, your robe snagging briefly on a stray shard of glass. You catch the flutter of saffron-robed figures rising and kneeling in precise rhythm. The incense smoke swirls above their heads like lazy smoke rings at a rock concert, only quieter, because this is a monastery, and shouty riffs are strictly forbidden. The butter lamps cast undulating shadows that make the entire scene look like a living parchment illustration. Sensory detail check. You feel the slight stick of melted fat on your palms, hear the plink-plink of dripping butter harmonizing with whispered chants, and taste a faint tang of salt in the air from reused butter. You glance at the stone floor ahead, spotting drip stains in the shapes of crude crosses and astrological symbols. Some monks swear these patterns predict weather changes. If the stain resembles a fish, expect rain; a crow, expect wind. Fringe scholars debate if this was genuine meteorology or just wishful thinking when laundry day fell on a wet morning. You chuckle, third joke achieved, while mentally noting that you might have to summarize this as medieval meteorology meets kitchen art. As Vespers approaches, you watch the monks transition from silent contemplation to communal singing. Their voices, raw and unamplified, rise up in a mournful polyphony that makes the hairs on your arms stand at attention. Butter lamps flicker, casting warm halos around each singer's face. You almost want to record this for your next social media post, ASMR Monastery Edition, but remind yourself that this place forbids distractions, especially ones involving smartphones and hashtag prayers. You lean forward, resting your chin on your hands, and catch the softest plink from a lamp to your left. That single drop has officially marked the halfway point between sext and none. Sext, the midday prayer, coincides with the sun seated high above the plateau, shedding golden light that pours through narrow windows like molten honey. None, the mid-afternoon prayer, will follow as shadows lengthen. You appreciate how the butter clocks invert the sun's path outside. Light travels fast, inside, time drips slow. A sudden gust rattles the wooden door, sending a swirl of dust motes dancing through a beam of sunlight. You reach to steady the nearest lamp, accidentally brushing melted butter into your sleeve. You resist the urge to sneeze, it would break the solemnity, but you do inhale a lungful of fragrant smoke and think, if I cough now, I'll be exiled to the goat pen. Rather than risk it, you sit very still, letting the gentle chaos of ritual wash over you. Nearby, Brother Aklalu struggles to wrangle a recalcitrant wick that keeps flaring too brightly. He complains in low tones about how recent rains have dampened the butter's melting properties, throwing off his drip rate calculations. In response, Sister Nayat produces a small vial of ground frankincense to sprinkle into the pool, claiming it stabilizes temperature fluctuations, an experimental innovation she swears by. You marvel at how even the simplest tasks become layered with trial, error, and spirited debate here. All around you, time stretches and contracts, measured not by rigid years but by the soft release of dairy fat. The monks move through their prayers with measured solemnity, pausing only when a lamp's strip misbehaves, prompting collective sighs and jovial teasing. Despite the sacred atmosphere, there's a sense of communal camaraderie. Butter clocks are as much social glue as spiritual tools. You realize that this slippery, slow method binds the community tighter than any bell or mechanical gear ever could. As lauds fades and terce draws near, you rise, your joints crackling in solidarity with centuries of wearying ease. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with the scent of incense, melted butter, and worn stone. You feel oddly at peace, synchronized, in a way, with the monastery's heartbeat as dictated by dripping fat. You step away, determined to keep walking this buttery timeline a little longer, because the next lamp, the next prayer, and the next ritual beckon you onward. You settle onto a low stone stool beside Brother Emmanuel's workbench, where he lays out the anatomy of a butter clock like a surgeon prepping instruments. Mainstream historical fact: precision instruments have been integral to monastic scholarship since the Carolingian Renaissance, when monks meticulously copied astronomical charts. The central piece is the shallow brass bowl, usually about 10 inches in diameter, engraved around its rim with 24 equidistant hash marks. You lean in so close you can feel the gentle heat rising from the metal, and the smell of clarified butter clings to your nostrils like a warm kitchen hug. At the bowl's center is a tiny, conical nozzle about the size of a knight's helmet plume, fringed tidbit. Some monks swore that shaping the spout like a bird's beak produced more uniform drips, while others preferred a simple tube, claiming it made prayer feel more bird-like. The nozzle is soldered into place with a lead tin alloy, then sealed with a thin layer of beeswax to prevent leaks. You imagine the medieval equivalent of a YouTube tutorial, how to wax your butter clock like a pro, and suppress a grin. A gentle joke flits through your mind: no subscriber count here, just butter counts. Beneath the nozzle sits a shallow catchment ring carved into the wooden plank or stone slab that supports the clock. These rings form concentric grooves, each representing a different time division. The outermost groove is for canonical hours, the middle for quarter hours, and the innermost for those extra devout days, 6-minute increments. You trace your fingertip along the grooves, feeling the slight unevenness where centuries-old drips have carved microscopic channels. Each groove collects drips sequentially, channeling them towards small collection wells where monks record their time with chalk marks. The vessel rests on a tripod stand sealed with resin from local pine trees, chosen for its insulating properties. You tap the stand with a fingernail and hear a hollow click, like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The height of the nozzle above the groove can be adjusted by sliding the bowl up or down along a vertical rod, a rudimentary yet effective calibration mechanism. You reach out to tweak it, nearly splashing melted butter onto your sleeve, and chuckle, one of your 3 jokes. It's all fun and games until your sleeve smells like a pat of butter. A drip forms, hanging on the nozzle's lip like a golden tear. You watch it stretch, shimmering in the flicker of lamplight, and then release with a gentle plop. The sound resonates across the silent workshop, punctuating the soft scratch of quills in a nearby scriptorium. Historians still argue whether the calibration markings on these bowls were standardized across different regions or if each monastery developed its own idiosyncratic system, but it's clear that even minor adjustments, like drilling a secondary notch, could translate into significant time shifts. You notice delicate inscriptions around the bowl's flange, short prayers in Guizi that read, "Melt away my sins," a poetic touch added by pious artisans. Fringe scholars debate whether these inscriptions were original or later embellishments meant to sanctify a mechanical device. You admire the craftsmanship. The letters are so finely incised they look as though a feather quill carved them during a deep trance. Brother Emmanuel flips the bowl upside down, revealing the soldered joint and the beeswax seal. He nods at you and says, "It must be airtight, even the slightest leak spoils your time." You inhale a whiff of resin and butter mingling, a sensory detail that grounds you in this medieval workshop more firmly than any modern lab ever could. The resin's piney aroma fights with the buttery scent, creating a heady cocktail that you half expect to pair with awkward hymn singing. Next, he shows you the stand's base, a circular wooden platform studded with iron nails forming a simple graph of time increments. The nails serve as tactile reference points for visually impaired monks. Another fringe tidbit: one blind monk reportedly memorized the entire drip sequence by running his fingers over the nail heads, timing prayers with uncanny accuracy. You bite back a laugh and marvel at the inclusivity of medieval monastic life. To ensure consistency, monks would preheat the brass bowl using hot coals, a step sometimes skipped when they were in a hurry. No prizes for guessing how that turned out. You recall the mustached face of Father Johannes, who once rushed the process and ended up with butter so hot it splattered violently, earning him a week of extra chores. You smirk, another gentle joke, imagining a monk hopping around the courtyard, cursing in Guizi about rogue butter. Calibration also involved temperature readings. Monks used rudimentary mercury thermometers. Mainstream fact: early mercury thermometers were in use by the 16th century and marked ambient temperature on the bowl side. When the monastery scriptorium was drafting astronomical tables, they cross-referenced these temperature logs with butter clock data, hoping to correlate drip rates with seasonal changes. Historians still argue whether these early experiments laid groundwork for modern chronometry or simply underscore humankind's obsession with punctuality. The brass bowl, stand, and catchment base together weigh around 5 pounds, portable enough to move between chapels, heavy enough to feel like you're carrying centuries of tradition. You heft the assembled clock onto your lap, noticing how warm metal and pine resin warm your thighs. The experience is oddly soothing, like a harmonic convergence of ritual and engineering. As you cradle the butter clock, you consider its imperfections. A tiny air bubble in the wax seal can drag the drip, a draft can alter the flame's heat, even altitude shifts can skew readings. But perhaps those flaws are part of its charm, a direct reminder that timekeeping, like life, is inherently messy. A final fringe tidbit tickles your mind. Some monks intentionally left minor defects so novices would learn humility by troubleshooting. You nod appreciatively, recognizing that every blemish tells a story. You set the clock back on the bench and lean forward, ready for the next phase of your buttery time journey. In this workshop of oil and ash, you've seen how simple components, bowl, nozzle, groove, combine in an elegant dance of physics and faith. And as you prepare to move on, you almost feel you've become part of that circuitry. A drop away from the next canonical hour. You slide into the wooden pew at the edge of the chapter house, the air still thick with candle soot and murmured Latin. Mainstream historical fact: medieval monasteries doubled as intellectual hubs, preserving and debating texts through the Dark Ages. Here, a group of ivory-robed scholars from the imperial court has gathered to question the monks' beloved butter clocks. The marble floor underfoot is slick with old drips, so you step carefully, feeling like you're on a slippery tightrope of ecclesiastical politics. You probably won't survive this debate if you accidentally knock over a lamp, but hey, at least you'll go out in a blaze of buttery glory. Brother Hiley stands at the lectern, butter clock in hand, its brass surface gleaming under torchlight. He speaks of divine precision, that every drop is a gift from God to mark sacred time. A visiting scholar in embroidered robes retorts that measuring hours by melted fat borders on superstition. You catch the faint scent of frankincense from the burner nearby, mingling with the sharper tang of heated butter. It's like a fruity candle and leftover popcorn snack at a reunion party in your nose. Joke number 1, if you get hungry mid-debate, just lick your fingers. Bonus time measurement. A tense hush falls as Dr. Lemma, the lead scholar, adjusts his spectacles and asks whether the monks can demonstrate consistent drip rates under scientific scrutiny. Brother Hiley pours a fresh knob of clarified butter into the clock's bowl, and the assembly leans forward. You wipe imaginary sweat from your brow. This is the monastic version of Mythbusters, but with more incense and fewer explosions. You grin at the absurdity. Coming up next, we test if butter clocks can survive medieval Game of Thrones plot twists. As the first drop forms, a quill-scratching scribe records the interval. Then another. Then another. Each plink resonates like a verdict. A fellow guest whispers, "Is it 30 seconds or 27?" prompting groans. You note that even small disagreements here feel like Olympic judging controversies, minus the spandex. Historians still argue whether butter clocks were primarily a scientific instrument or a superstitious ritual, and you savor the phrase as it echoes through the hall like a secret password. Joke number 2, you wonder if there's a butter clock fan club with monthly newsletters. The debate pivots to ritual context. The monks insist that butter dripping in prayer is an act of devotion, not merely a mechanical act. They point to 13th century manuscripts where abbots blessed the first ladle of melted fat before morning prayers. The scholars scoff, comparing it to reading tea leaves or consulting a magic 8-ball for agricultural forecasts. You nearly spill your own lapful of butter-smeared notes and have to stifle a laugh. At least a magic 8-ball drip gives straight answers, you mumble under your breath. Sister Salam, who usually oversees evening vespers, strides forward to defend the spiritual integrity of their timekeeping. She describes how the flicker of each lamp and the drip of each drop create a meditative rhythm that keeps monks grounded in the present moment. The assembly nods appreciatively, mostly because everyone loves a good ASMR moment. Sensory detail. You feel the warmth of the lamps on your cheeks, hear the low hum of hushes and quills, and taste the faint spice of myrrh smoke on your tongue. Then Brother Yared pipes up with a fringe tidbit. He claims butter clocks can predict the onset of rainy seasons. If the drip's slow beyond a certain threshold, expect weeks of drizzle. The scholars wrinkle their noses, calling it weather superstition, but you can't help but admire the monastic meteorology. You crack your third joke. Maybe they should sell Buttercast subscriptions to local farmers. The room breaks into polite chuckles, tension diffused for a moment by your cutting wit. Dr. Lemma crosses his arms. Surely this is ad hoc reasoning, he declares, like attributing stock market trends to a priest's morning yogurt. He jabs a finger at the clock's nozzle, and everyone flinches, expecting an oily spray. You swallow, thinking you'd pay good coin to see that on YouTube. Instead, Brother Hiley invites the scholars to try calibrating the device themselves. A young academic nervously lifts the brass bowl, nearly tips it, and punctuates the moment with a small greasy splatter on his sleeve. You snort. Academic robes look surprisingly flimsy when speckled with butter. A scholar from the back row stands, wiping his sleeve with a trembling hand. If it's practical, why haven't we seen butter clocks in all European monasteries? He asks. The monks respond that local resources matter. Goat milk butter is abundant here, while water and oil clocks prevail elsewhere. Suddenly, you're reminded of dietary differences. One monk once quipped that a European olive oil clepsydra was fine for sipping, not dribbling. You stifle a laugh at the culinary critique. Historians still argue whether this debate marked the beginning of Ethiopian monastic contributions to chronometry or merely a quaint footnote in horological history. You picture dusty libraries in Aksum, stacks of scrolls debating butter viscosity versus the wheel of a water clock. Sensory detail. You imagine the old parchment crackling under candlelight, goosequill pens dragging across margin notes scrawled in miniature. The argument crescendos when Brother Tekul challenges Dr. Lemma to record a full canonical cycle, 6 hours, using only the butter clock, while the scholars used their sundial and water clock. You lean forward, heart pounding like a drum, imagining a medieval timekeeper's triathlon. If the butter clock wins, the monks get a new wing. If it loses, Brother Hiley must recite the entire Psalter backward. You giggle at your own dramatics. Joke number 3. Maybe there should be a butter clock Olympics with opening ceremonies in a vat of melted fat. Soon the assembly disperses, each side nodding respectfully even as their eyes blaze with conviction. You exhale, feeling the afterglow of spirited debate. The small triangular stain on the floor marks where the final drop landed, almost like a battlefield relic. You sink onto a nearby cushion, letting the heated buzz of discussion wash over you like a warm, greasy blanket. As you rise to leave, Sister Salam offers you a small pat of fresh butter on crusty bread, a peacemaker's gesture that tastes oddly sweet with reconciliation. You chew thoughtfully, savoring the contrast of salted richness and a momentary truce. Outside, the highland breeze carries away the acrid scent of debate, leaving only the softer perfume of pine resin and fading incense. You pause at the door, glancing back as the scholars and monks exchange courteous bows. In this sacred hall, science and superstition waltz together, each drip a step in a slow, ancient dance. You realize that whether butter clocks are scientific instruments or divine rituals, they embody a yearning to measure life's passage one slow, golden drop at a time. You step out into the courtyard, the highland wind tousling your hair as you reflect on the debate you've just witnessed. Butter clocks may never land on every monastery's mantle, but they will persist in whispered stories and the fragrant glow of lamps long after today's verdicts fade. And you, dear listener, carry that legacy forward, drip by drip, through the rest of this buttery journey. You step outside into the crisp highland morning, the limestone walls still warm from dawn's first sunlight, and immediately feel the chill nip at your skin. Mainstream historical fact: Ethiopian highland climates can swing nearly 30 degrees Fahrenheit between dawn and midday. That temperature shift isn't just uncomfortable, it tangibly warps the drip rate of every butter clock inside those thick walls. You tug your robe tighter, glad for the extra layer, and marvel at how nature itself becomes part of the timekeeping apparatus. The monastery's climate control is zero to medieval: stone architecture, narrow windows, and thick thatch roofs. There are no thermostats, no weather forecasts on your phone, just you, a handful of monks, and the mercy of the elements. When you return to the lamp-lined corridor later, you'll notice that the drip you recorded at 6:00 a.m. flows nearly twice as slow as the one at high noon, because warmer bowls liquefy butter faster. A fringe tidbit whispers that one particularly inventive monk rigged a spool of wet cloth around his lampstand, hoping to moderate heat by slow evaporation. Historians still argue whether that counts as early air conditioning or unholy condensation. On the courtyard's edge, you meet Brother Bogale, who holds a simple wooden box filled with small amber vials. Each vial contains a differently rendered melted butter sample, one from goat's milk, one from yak, and one from stray cow fat donated by nearby farmers. He offers you a whiff of each. The goat's butter smells grassy and tangy, yak's is richer and slightly metallic, and cow's is bland but creamy. You inhale deeply, nose filling with dairy perfume, and chuckle. One of your 3 jokes smells like the world's most exclusive perfume sampler. Brother Bogale explains that each sample's fatty acid composition shifts melting point, meaning clocks must be recalibrated daily or hourly on sweltering afternoons. He sprinkles a pinch of crushed frankincense into one vial and swears it stabilizes the drip under changing humidity. You scratch your head. This is less kitchen wizardry and more alchemy class. Historians still argue whether these aromatic add-ins were genuine innovations or just perfumed placebo. As you follow him back inside, you glimpse the central corridor where the lamps hang in a gentle curve. You hear the soft patter of drips echoing like raindrops in a cave. It's oddly soothing until you remember that each plink is subject to yesterday's weather. One day, a sudden afternoon storm cooled the air so drastically that the butter thickened mid-drip, halting the device and triggering an unscheduled vigil. A lofty debate ensued. Was this divine intervention or simply a failure of material science? You brush past a dripping lamp and feel fresh droplets land on your skin. Sensory detail: cold, slick, and slightly gritty from suspended incense ash. You blink and see a small triangular stain on the flagstone marking the spot. According to fringe lore, each stain tells a weather story. Smooth and circular means calm skies, jagged edges signal wind gusts. You giggle, your second joke. Who needs weather apps when your floor has better forecasting? In the workshop, you watch Sister Tibet gently stroke a cloth soaked in cool spring water along a bronze bowl rim. Her goal: to create a microclimate that tempers the metal's heat. She mumbles, "Too cool, and it drips like molasses, too warm, and it runs like a river." The result is a near constant drip rate that cuts down recalibration time. You lean in close, tasting the faint hint of moss and mineral in the damp cloth. Another sensory note sealing this moment in your memory. Meanwhile, Brother Xanadu is on the balcony, eyeballing the sun's angle against a sundial etched into the monastery wall. He compares its reading to the butter clock schedule, jotting down discrepancies in a leather-bound journal. You peek over his shoulder and see numbers like +3 at 3 p.m. and 2 at 8 a.m. He shrugs and writes a quick formula to adjust his next drip interval. You note his meticulous process. It feels like watching someone tune a Stradivarius by ear. Historians still argue whether these early chronometric comparisons influenced later European observatories, but it's clear that Ethiopian monks were more than content scribes, they were experimental scientists. A sudden gust whistles in through the balcony, sending a swirl of dust across Xanadu's journal. Butter droplets skip along the railing, leaving tiny polished dots on rough wood. You reach to steady the lamp and nearly topple the journal, but catch it just in time. Your heart jumps, and you joke internally, note to self, don't play Jenga with drippy lamps. Back in the chapter house, the climate's impact becomes a communal challenge. Monks migrate along the corridor like chess pieces, each assigned to monitor specific lamps. They swap spots as the sun moves, so no one clock bakes under intense beams while another languishes in shade. This live choreography keeps time measurement balanced, though it looks like a medieval conga line rather than a solemn procession. You join a trio of novices tasked with shading lamps using wooden screens. One novice complains about how uneven shading makes readings inconsistent. Another counters that too much shade invites mold to grow on the butter. You laugh, third joke unlocked, and remind yourself this is not amateur hour but a finely tuned ballet of butter and shadow. The novices argue, gesturing emphatically with butter-stained gloves, their breath misting in the cool air. As dusk falls, the temperature plummets, and butter begins to congeal just above the nozzle, causing erratic drips that threaten the timing of Compline, the final prayer of the day. Monks huddle around fireplaces, preheating bowls and rotating them back into the corridor at intervals. The heat crackles in the hearth, adding smoky undertones to the ever-present butter aroma. Sensory detail: you feel the comforting warmth on your face, hear the soft crackle of pine logs, and taste the lingering tang of earlier incense. Though the climate's whimsy can drive even the most patient monk to distraction, it also fosters creativity. Nowhere is this clearer than in remote hermitages high above the plateau, where a handful of solitary ascetics have perfected terraced crucibles that capture morning mist to pre-warm butter. Historians still argue whether their methods were more religious ritual than scientific experiment, but their legacy endures in the stable rhythms of solitary prayer. You stand once more in the hallway, reaching to steady a wavering lamp. A single golden drop clings to the nozzle before falling in perfect time, your final drip of the day in this corridor. You breathe deeply, letting the complexities of climate, material, and devotion swirl together into a rich tapestry that transcends mere hours and minutes. You step outside into the cool evening breeze, your fingers still warmed by the lamp's residue. Ahead lies more debate, more calibration, more buttery mysteries waiting to unravel. But for now, you pause, feeling the highland air, sharp, fresh, and real, contrasting with the heady world of melted butter behind you. And you realize that in this monastery, time is a living thing, ever shaped by wind, temperature, and the tactile essence of Derry itself. You return to the dimly lit chapel just as twilight settles over the highland horizon, and immediately notice how the melting butter's glow deepens in the soft dusk. Mainstream historical fact: monasteries often relied on adaptive lighting to signal transitions between offices when clocks failed. The warm lamplight flickers against frescoed walls depicting angels and saints, their painted eyes seeming to follow you as you approach the central aisle. You probably won't survive an evening here without a firm grip on your faith and a sturdy pair of gloves to catch wayward drips. Ahead, you find Brother Gebremichael cradling a lamp precariously close to a carved stone lectern. He's preparing for the Quasquicentennial Vigil, a secretly lengthened midnight service rumored to have grown thanks to the butter clock's uneven drip rate. Fringe tidbit. Some claim that during this vigil, the clock dripped slower than usual, leading monks to chant for nearly 2 extra hours. You swallow, imagining your bedtime collapsing into an endless loop of Kyrie eleison. As you settle onto a pew behind him, the scent of honeyed grass and melted yak butter mingles with incense smoke. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sensory blend wash over you. The experience is oddly soothing, like drifting off to sleep listening to a crackling campfire podcast. Broken only by the soft plink-plink orchestrating the vigil's tempo. Brother Gebremichael adjusts the lamp's wick, whispering a prayer for a steady drip. You peek at the brass bowl and discern a tiny chip at the rim, where a previous mishap fractured the edge. Historians still argue whether this chip, a defect introduced by a late-night scuffle, gives the lamp its legendary slow drip quality, but local lore celebrates it as the tear of an angel, imbuing each drop with extra sanctity. The vigil begins with a hushed intonation of Psalm 90. The choir's voices rise in layered harmony, and every half-verse is punctuated by a drop hitting the collection plate below. You count silently, 5 plinks, 6 plinks, 7, and realize your heart sinks with the rhythm. A gentle joke crosses your mind: this is the ultimate metronome, just add butter and call it sacred. As midnight deepens, the air grows cooler, causing the butter to stiffen and drips to linger longer on the nozzle. You notice that each drop's path curls slightly inward, as if drawn to the stone's secret heart. A fringe scholar once theorized that chapel walls, carved from volcanic rock, retain heat differently, subtly affecting drip trajectories. Historians still argue whether these geological factors influenced monastic architecture or if the chapel was built around the butter clock. You grin at the irony: architecture designed by horologists. The vigil stretches on, and you feel the weight of time pressing in. Your eyelids grow heavy, and each plink seems to echo into your bones. The novelty has worn off, replaced by a deep, quiet awe. You remember your own life's hurried pace, notifications, deadlines, the endless scroll of digital clocks. Here, time is an embodied ritual, a dance of fat and faith that invites you to slow down and simply be. Suddenly, a late drop breaks the steady pattern, landing with a crisp plink 2 notches beyond the expected marker. Brother Gebremichael gasps, glancing at the ancient manuscript propped nearby. By the prophet's palm, we've gained 15 extra minutes, he whispers. A ripple of excitement courses through the monks. You bite back a smile, joke too. No wonder they call it the Quasquicentennial Vigil. The choir transitions to chant a benediction, and you sense a shift in energy. What began as a measure of hours has become a vessel for collective transcendence. Butter, flame, and prayer converge into a singular, luminous moment. Your senses sharpen, the tang of charred wick, the soft rasp of robes against stone, the golden glow reflecting in every eye. When the final psalm fades, Brother Gebremichael lifts the lamp high. You lean forward, watching as he pours the remaining melted butter into a small chalice reserved for morning's blessing. This act, part ritual, part timekeeping, seals the vigil, transforming burnt candle wax and dairy fat into sacrificial oil. Fringe tradition holds that anyone who kisses the chalice before dawn will dream of divine revelations. You chuckled joke 3, would you risk it, dear listener? With the ceremony over, the monks disperse quietly into sleeping cells, guided by the same drip rhythm that marked their vigil. You linger a moment longer, tracing your fingers through cool, hardened butter along the chapel's edge, a tactile reminder of time's passage. Then you rise and follow the flickering lights back toward the corridor, ready for the next dawn. As you step out into the silent courtyard, the highland wind greets you like an old friend, carrying the faint echoes of hymn and drip. You inhale deeply, steeling yourself for tomorrow's buttery mysteries. And with that, you tuck the vigil's shimmering imprint into your memory, marching onward through this ancient world where melted butter measures eternity. You slip back into the scriptorium just as dawn's first light seeps through narrow windows, illuminating rows of parchments strewn across heavy oak tables. Mainstream historical fact: scriptoria were the intellectual heart of medieval monasteries, where monks labored over texts for hours on end. Today, you're here to witness how butter clocks guided scholarly work, shaping the pace at which manuscripts were copied and illuminated. Rows of brass butter lamps hover above ink-stained scrolls, their drips marking transcription intervals. You perch on a stool, elbow resting on a stack of vellum, and watch as Brother Simeon stops his quill mid-letter to note a drip in the margin. A quirky tidbit. Some scribes colored their drip marks red to symbolize the blood of martyrs, blending devotion with timekeeping. Historians still argue whether these colorful annotations served practical or purely decorative purposes, but they make each manuscript a living chronicle of butter and belief. Around you, novices chatter softly about last night's quasquicentennial vigil, comparing who heard extra drips. You smile at their hushed excitement, like schoolkids swapping ghost stories. One novice boasts that his lamp dripped 5 extra minutes, earning him an extra pre-prayer snack. You mentally tally joke 1, the earliest recorded Holy Hangry episode. Across the room, Sister Miriam meticulously uses a butter clock to time the drying of gold leaf on an illuminated G at the start of a gospel page. She wields a tiny fan to coax the leaf's adhesion, relying on buttery drip intervals to know exactly when to proceed. You inhale the metallic scent of gold mingled with butter. Sensory detail that feels like alchemy in action. As the morning progresses, temperatures rise, speeding drips and sending scholars into quiet panic. Brother Simeon sprinkles a pinch of powdered myrrh into his lamp, claiming it slows the flow. Historians still argue whether aromatic additives improved accuracy or simply masked rancid odors, but you appreciate the resourcefulness. By midday, the scriptorium's rhythmic syncopation of quill taps and butter plinks creates a musical tapestry. A living ASMR track that soothes your restless mind. You lean back, closing your eyes, and drift for a heartbeat on the gentle waves of sound. Joke 2, best medieval mindfulness practice ever. As afternoon shadows lengthen, a stray breeze from an open window blows embers from the hearth, threatening manuscripts. Panic ensues, scribes blow out butter lamps too close to parchments, nearly igniting their work. You note the close call, fringe tidbit. One scribe lost an entire gospel page when a butter drop ignited a fire. Historians still argue if that lost page contains secret apocryphal verses or just a medieval grocery list. By evening, the scriptorium hush returns. Monks gather to review completed work, using butter clocks to time readings of new passages. Each drip signals a page turn, binding the act of reading to the sacred timekeeping tradition. You watch a senior monk nod approvingly, his eyes reflecting lamp glow and devotion entwined. Before you leave, you dip a fingertip into residual butter pooled at the clock's base, tasting its faintly tangy sweetness, a final sensory note tying together the day's cycles of creation, study, and prayer. You rise, heart full of quiet awe, ready to return tomorrow to trace history's dripping pulse. You slip back into the scriptorium just as dawn's first light seeps through narrow windows, illuminating rows of parchments strewn across heavy oak tables. Mainstream historical fact: scriptoria were the intellectual heart of medieval monasteries, where monks labored over texts for hours on end. Today, you're here to witness how butter clocks guided scholarly work, subtly shaping the pace at which manuscripts were copied and illuminated. Rows of brass butter lamps hover above ink-stained scrolls, their drips marking transcription intervals. You perch on a stool, elbow resting on a stack of vellum, and watch Brother Simeon stop his quill mid-letter to note a drip in the margin. A quirky tidbit: some scribes colored their drip marks red to symbolize the blood of martyrs, blending devotion with timekeeping in a vivid flourish of pigment. You smirk at how modern students would kill for that kind of note-taking flair. Historians still argue whether these colorful annotations served practical or purely decorative purposes. Some say they helped maintain focus, others insist they were status symbols among scribes. Across the room, Sister Miriam meticulously uses a butter clock to time the drying of gold leaf on an illuminated G at the start of a gospel page. She wields a tiny handheld fan, staccato breaths guiding delicate sheets of beaten gold. Each fan flick aligns with a butter drip, sensory detail. The faint metallic scent of gold mingling with buttery tang that clings to your senses like an exotic perfume. You feel the parchment beneath your fingertips, its texture cool and papery, contrasted by the warmth radiating from the lamp above. As the morning sun climbs, temperature shifts become stark. You notice the butter drips accelerating, plink, 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 so fast your head spins. Novices scurry to recalibrate by pre-warming bowls over small charcoal braziers. One novice's bowl overheats, spewing droplets that sizzle on the stone floor like popcorn kernels. A fringe tidbit: a chronicler once described such an incident as butter rain, lamenting its mess in his margins. You chuckled, joke one, medieval snack preparation gone rogue. Meanwhile, Brother Simeon experiments with aromatic additives. He sprinkles ground myrrh into his lamp, claiming it slows the flow and imparts a sacred fragrance to the manuscripts. You inhale tentatively. Frankincense and butter swirl in your nostrils, and wonder if anyone's ever tried saffron. Historians still argue whether these additives improved accuracy or simply masked rancid odors. Either way, they turn mundane timekeeping into a sensory ritual. By midday, the scriptorium's rhythmic tapestry of quill taps and butter plinks creates an almost hypnotic ASMR effect. You lean back, closing your eyes for a heartbeat as the sounds wash over you. Between drips, you hear the soft rasp of parchment being turned, the scratch of goosequill nibs scoring ink, and distant murmurs of lectures slip in from an adjacent chamber. Sensory detail, the room feels simultaneously cramped and expansive, bound by walls yet open to centuries of accumulated knowledge. Suddenly, a stray breeze from an open window wafts in, disrupting the lamplight and sending embers from a nearby brazier dancing across a manuscript. Panic ensues. The scribes hiss and wave at the fire, snuffing it out before it can scorch the precious vellum. You note the close call, fringe tidbit. One scribe lost an entire gospel page to such embers and later wrote an apologetic poem about the day the angels wept ink. Historians still argue if that lost page contains secret apocryphal verses or merely mundane glosses, but the story endures as a cautionary tale about mixing flame and parchment. As afternoon shadows lengthen, fatigue sets in. You see a novice's hands tremble as she struggles to maintain consistent drip notation. Brother Simeon notices and quietly offers her a spoonful of sweet teff porridge. Joke 2, monastic energy bars or go. The novice brightens, resets her drip marks, and resumes work with renewed focus. This simple act, nourishment timed between drips, underscores how butter clocks not only measure time but structure daily care. By late afternoon, the scriptorium hush returns. Monks gather for a brief reading of new passages, using butter drips to signal page turns. Each plink cues a next leaf, binding reading to ritual. You watch a senior monk nod approvingly, his eyes reflecting lamp glow and deep satisfaction. Sensory detail, the soft crackle of simmering coals from the brazier, the gentle scrape of parchment, the faint whiff of earlier incense still hanging in the air. Before you leave, you dip a fingertip into residual butter pooled at a clock's base, tasting its faintly tangy sweetness, a final sensory note that ties together the day's cycles of creation, study, and prayer. You let the buttery aftertaste linger as you stretch, noticing how your limbs have grown stiff from hours of still stooping. You rise, heart full of quiet awe, ready to return tomorrow to trace history's dripping pulse. You follow the cobblestone path down from the monastery's main gate into the bustling market town at the foot of the Highland Cliffs. Mainstream historical fact: Ethiopian monasteries often served as economic hubs, trading surplus goods with local villages and caravans. Here, goat milk butter isn't just for prayer lamps, it's currency. You probably won't survive a negotiation if you can't haggle over a liter of butter without accidentally insulting someone's grandmother, but hey, think of it as the original farmer's market, minus the vegan booth. Stalls line the street, stacked with woven baskets of teff, clusters of coffee cherries, and glistening pats of butter wrapped in banana leaves. A trader named Tesfaye beckons you over, offering 3 vials of clarified butter for a chicken and half a loaf of injera. You wrinkle your nose at the poultry but haggle nonetheless. Joke 1, who knew timekeeping could be so edible? Sensory detail, the tang of fermented batter in the air mixes with the rich dairy aroma, punctuated by distant church bells' chime-like calls to prayer echoing off earthen walls. Brother Bogale stands nearby, clipboard in hand, tallying butter contributions from local farmers. He explains that every monastic household must contribute a set quota of butter each season to sustain their clock workshops. A fringe tidbit: some villagers once substituted animal fat mixed with pine resin to meet their quotas, prompting monks to stage a butter audit. Historians still argue whether that incident sparked the first monastic tax reforms or simply a very messy cleanup. You can't help but grin. Imagine the spreadsheets before Excel. As you weave through the crowd, a young merchant hawks scented butter candles embossed with monastery seals. He claims they burn longer and drip more consistently, an artisanal upgrade marketed directly to wealthier abbeys. You lift one to your nose, a heady blend of frankincense and toasted barley. Sensory detail, warm, spicy notes that whisper of hearth and worship. You resist the urge to buy one for your bedside table. Innocent joke 2, sleep tight, don't let the butter clock bite. At the market's center, monks have set up a demonstration stall. They invite townspeople to try their hand at timing a set interval by marking drips on parchment. A gaggle of curious onlookers presses forward, each eager to test if their butter sample drips faster than the next. You join the fray, dipping your finger into a communal vat and timing your drop. The moment you lift your scribbled note, a dozen villagers cheer. You've beaten the local blacksmith by 2 notches. You beam, joke 3. Who needs Olympic medals when you've got butter bragging rights? Nearby, Sister Nijas sells small amulets carved in the shape of butter droplets, believed to bestow punctuality upon their owners. She whispers that if worn around the neck, the amulet syncs the wearer's heartbeat to the sacred drip rhythm. A French scholar once wrote that these charms influenced early mechanical escapements in European clocks. Historians still argue whether the connection is fact or fanciful legend. You finger the smooth wood, imagining a medieval Fitbit tracking every heartbeat. Sensory detail, the warm polish of the wood pressed against your palm. As midday sun peaks overhead, you retreat to a shaded bench beside a bubbling fountain. Fresh spring water plays its own watery rhythm, reminding you of the water clocks you glimpsed in foreign texts. A traveling merchant from Alexandria once marveled that Ethiopia invented fat time while the civilized world clung to water. You laugh inwardly. Modern joke for your mental tally, fat time. Faster than water, stickier than sand. You watch farmers unload goat carts, their animals bleating softly. Each cart carries barrels of fresh butter destined for the monastery's stores. Monks note the quality, clarity, color, melting point. A slipshod batch means extra trials at the vat. A superior batch earns you an extra moment of prayer. The market steward inspects each barrel, dipping his stick to measure viscosity. Fringe debate. Some historians argue that these quality checks prefigured modern food safety standards, others dismiss them as simple overreach. Either way, you appreciate the diligence or maybe the sheer obsession with dairy. A merchant woman beckons you, offering a sample of spiced butter infused with berbera chili and garlic, claimed to accelerate drips in cooler weather. You tentatively taste a finger's dollop, fiery heat followed by creamy richness. Sensory detail. The burn of chili, the earthy warmth of garlic, cut by the lingering sweetness of butter. You cough discreetly. Joke 4, nothing like a little spice to make time fly. Brother highly strides past, overseeing the economic exchange with a calm, steady gaze. He reminds you that butter clocks aren't just spiritual tools, they're vital for the monastery's self-sufficiency. Surplus butter funds repairs, supports charity kitchens, and even pays for rare manuscripts. You reflect. A device born from breakfast desperation now underpins an entire community's prosperity. It's a lesson in resourcefulness that resonates even in our modern gig economy. Time is money, after all. As the afternoon wanes, you help pack leftover butter into sealed clay jars for transport back to the monastery. You inhale the rich aroma one last time, lungs filling with the scent of dairy, spice, and devotion. You feel the weight of your day's journey, market hall to chapel, workshop to scriptorium. A tapestry woven together by golden drips. You stand, wiping butter-smudged palms on your robe, ready to return to the monastery's cool corridors. The market's bustle fades behind you, leaving only the soft echo of distant drips and prayer calls. You realize that in this world, butter isn't just food, it's faith, time, and livelihood, each drop a testament to human creativity and communal bonds. You step through the gate, crate of jars in hand, determined to see how tomorrow's dawn will melt away the next layer of monastic time. And you know, with every drip you trace, you carry forward the legacy of melted butter, simple, sticky, and utterly essential. You trudge back through the monastery's arched gateway as dusk settles, the sky streaked with violet and rose, mainstream historical fact. Evening offerings in monastic tradition date to early desert fathers who consecrated sunset meals with prayers. Here, you're invited to observe the ritual of the evening offering, where melted butter transforms from clockwork fuel into a living sacrament. You probably won't survive this feast or ritual without mastering at least one ancient blessing and avoiding a dripping lamp mishap, but hey, consider it holy happy hour. Inside the refectory, long wooden tables bear plates of steaming injera heaped with spicy lentils, soft cheese, and, of course, bowls of clarified butter. Monks file in silently, each receiving a ladle of butter poured from a large chalice warmed over coals. The celebrant, Abba Tesfahan, stands at the center, holding aloft the chalice like a priest with a chalice of wine. He intones, "Blessed be this butter, fuel of our time and fire of our prayers." A fringe tidbit. Some friars whispered that if you swallowed a drop before prayer, you'd dream in vivid visions of past saints. Historians still argue whether this was a sanctioned practice or alcoholic hallucination. You smirk, one of your 3 jokes for this section. Who needs dream journals when you've got dairy-induced visions? Each monk steps forward in turn, dips his ladle, and pours a small stream of melted butter into their individual butter clocks, reciting an abbreviated creed. Sensory detail. You hear the liquid trickle, smell the nutty richness of butter warmed by the coals, and see embers dancing beneath the chalice, casting golden glints on the stone floor. You can almost taste the sweet tang of butter mixed with stewed lentils lingering in the air. When the butter clock collections are refilled, the monks arrange them in a neat semicircle in front of the altar. Abba Tesfahan flicks his wick to ignite each lamp, and a chorus of soft whooshes fills the hall. He raises his hands and invites you to join in a communal prayer. You close your eyes, bench creaking beneath you, and recite the words in unison with over 50 voices. The room hums with sincerity, even your heartbeat settles into a cooperative rhythm. As the prayer concludes, the rhythmic drip of butter lamps marks your official start of the evening meal. Each drop lands in tiny vessels beneath the lamps, and monks nod in silent thanks before lifting spoonfuls of stew and bread. You lean forward, tasting the lentils, hearty, spiced with berbera, and still tinged by yesterday's butter rain spice experiment, and realize every mouthful is timed by a golden drop. Joke 2 surfaces, dinner served when butter falls, talk about pressure cooking. Between bites, Abba Tesfahan addresses the assembly, noting how the evening's drip rate should align with Compline prayers at the sacred hour. He gestures to an enormous grand butter clock behind the altar. A tiered, multi-nozzle contraption engineered by the monastery's master horologist. This grand clock tracks longer intervals. Each of its 5 bowls marks an hour, dripping into a central reservoir that rings a small bronze bell when full. Fringe scholars debate whether this bell qualifies as the first mechanical time signal in Ethiopia. Historians still argue if it predated European tower clocks, yet here it stands, testament to butter's evolution from humble fuel to communal instrument. You rise to inspect the grand clock more closely. It's a marvel, brass bowls stacked like a wedding cake, each spout calibrated to drip at distinct rates. The lowest bowl feeds into the central reservoir, whose rising butter level lifts a tiny float that ultimately jingles the bell. You trace the intricate network of channels with your fingertip, feeling the warmth and slight stickiness of aged butter residue. Sensory detail. The combined aroma of dozen lamps and simmering stew envelopes you in a buttery cocoon. Nearby, Sister Adenek explains that this grand clock was a gift from a traveling noble who, impressed by the monastery's butter clocks, commissioned a more elaborate device to replace sundial readings during rainy seasons. She taps a finger on one bowl, noting its slight dent, evidence of a peasant revolt when farmers protested butter taxes by jabbing pitchforks at the monastery's butter store. You raise an eyebrow. Joke 3. Nothing says grassroots protests like butter vandalism. She laughs softly, admitting the dent was quickly soldered, but the story endures as a testament to butter's political power. Dinner continues in sync with the lamp strips. You watch as monks pause mid-chew, listening for the next drop before raising silver spoons to their lips. The plink of each drop echoes like gentle applause, marking each course's transition. You note how your own chewing synchronizes with the rhythm, as if your body understands the ancient pact between nourishment and time. Sensory detail, the slight warmth of the butter-laced stew on your tongue, the gentle echo of drips from lamps above, the hush of contented munching around you. As the grand clock's lowest bowl empties, the reservoir's float slowly rises. You hold your breath as the float tips, jingling the bronze bell with a soft chime that reverberates through the refectory. Heads lift in silent acknowledgement. You sit upright, spoon halfway to your mouth, struck by the harmonious convergence of butter, prayer, and communal feast. In that moment, the world outside, laypeople's hustle, distant clatter of market stalls, fades away. After the chime, monks lower their heads in final blessings. Plates are cleared with deliberate care, and last strips from the clocks signal the conclusion of supper and the start of Compline. You smile, realizing that dinner here is more than sustenance. It's a ritualized passage of time, a celebration of community, and an embodiment of faith, all distilled, literally, into melted butter. You rise, brushing crumbs from your robe, and join the monks in filing out toward the cloister for the final prayers of the day. Ahead lies rest, reflection, and the promise of dawn's next buttery dawn. But for now, the ritual of the evening offering has woven you into the monastery's timeless tapestry, one measured by heartbeats, morsels, and golden droplets. You slip into the northern wing of the monastery, where a slate-gray water clock glistens beneath a dripstone fountain. Mainstream historical fact, clepsydras, or water clocks, date back to ancient Egypt and were adopted by Greeks by the 3rd century BC. Word has it that a traveling ambassador from Alexandria presented this very device 5 years ago, hoping to impress the abbot with modern chronometry. You probably won't survive the ensuing technological clash if you can't pronounce clepsydra, but hey, at least you'll have a cool party trick. The water clock consists of 2 stone basins joined by a narrow channel. The upper bowl drips at a calibrated rate, filling the lower basin to mark hours. A leather pouch inside the lower basin floats up as it fills, triggering a lever that clangs a small bronze gong. Sensory detail. The hollow metallic resonance ripples through the tiled floor, mingling with your heartbeat. You lean in, feeling the cool mist from the fountain spray, and suppress a shiver. Joke 1. Who needs spa days when you've got ancient Egyptian air conditioning? Down the corridor, a marble sundial stands in a sunlit niche, its gnomon casting a sharp triangular shadow across etched hour lines. The midday sun cuts through narrow windows like divine spotlights, illuminating the dial's surface. You step into the light and see three etched nearly 6 inches long, symbolic of the Trinity, a detail added by the monks to sanctify pagan technology. A fringe tidbit: one monk secretly replaced the Roman numerals with Guizi characters overnight, leading visitors to believe the device was homegrown. Historians still argue whether such modifications were clever syncretism or deceptive propaganda. You gather with a small crowd of monks, some clutching butter clock bowls, others gesturing excitedly at the water clock's basin. The debate is in full swing, but the butter lamp blends devotion and measurement, insists Brother Mesfin, butter drips glinting in his beard. The water clock offers consistent intervals regardless of weather, retorts Sister Hannah, flicking droplets from her sleeve. You sip your lukewarm water. Joke 2. I guess hydrating is the new sacred oil. A visiting scholar strokes his chin, eyeing both devices. Which do you trust more to call the Angelus? He asks, voice echoing. The monks exchange glances. Scheduling prayer by butter drip feels more intimate. Water's flow seems impersonal yet precise. You inhale the mingled sense of damp stone and rancid butter, sensory detail that encapsulates this crossroads of tradition and innovation. Historians still argue whether the adoption of water clocks marked a turning point in monastic science or was merely an ostentatious display by worldly envoys. Some ancient manuscripts credit Ethiopian hermits with refining clepsydra design, others dismiss the effort as vanity. You picture a bespectacled monk toiling over diagrams in a candlelit cellar, quill scratching, water splashing, engineering by dim lamplight. Meanwhile, the sundial's silent promise of solar precision stands in contrast. You step into the sunbeam and watch the shadow inch forward. It feels like time leaping ahead in broad strokes, compared to the butter clock's gentle drip. A fringe scholar once theorized that monks used both devices in tandem, butter lamps for devotional tempo, sundials for market hours. Historians still argue whether this dual system spurred Ethiopia's famed timekeeping diaspora or simply sowed confusion. You wander toward the chapter house, where a large chart compares drip rates, water flow volumes, and shadow lengths. Monks in spectacles scribble formulas: delta T equals F, delta T, V, plus C, they muse, blending empirical rigor with theological commentary. You almost expect a PowerPoint slide. Instead, it's hand-drawn graphs on parchment, the edges curling from water splashes. Sensory detail: the parchment's musty texture, the slight shimmer of dried ink under lamp glow. Across the room, Brother Cassu demonstrates a hybrid contraption, a water-driven butter melter that feeds clocks automatically. He pours water through a trough that warms a copper coil wrapped around a butter vessel, ingenious, if somewhat over-engineered. Behold, he says, the future of time. You watch the coil steam, the butter melting uniformly, drip after drip. You can't help but laugh. Joke 3. Next up, a self-buttering injera machine. The assembly bursts into polite applause. Some monks whisper concerns: will reliance on water and copper undermine the simplicity of faith-driven timing? Others see it as divine progress. You sense the undercurrent of anxiety. Adopting new tech risks severing ties to ancestral wisdom. Still, the promise of consistent prayer intervals and fewer late vigils tempts many. A senior monk, wizened and stooped, clears his throat. He holds a butter lamp in one hand, a sundial fragment in the other, and declares, each method reveals a facet of God's order: fat, water, and light. The room falls silent. You feel goosebumps, sensory detail, the hushed reverence, the faint drip echoing like a heartbeat. In that moment, innovation and tradition unite under a single truth: measuring time is, at its core, an act of worship. You step back, absorbing the tableau, brass lamps, stone basins, sunlit dials, and fluttering parchments. The debate may persist for decades, but you've witnessed a pivotal chapter in monastic horology. As you leave the chamber, the water clock's gentle gong follows you down the corridor, a reminder that time, like faith, flows in myriad forms, melted, poured, and cast in shadow. You slip out into the courtyard, feeling the cool evening air on your face. Ahead lies more innovation, more rituals, and countless strips yet to fall. And you realize that whether measured by butter, water, or sun, each moment is a gift, liquid, fleeting, and golden. You slip through a hidden door into a remote hermitage perched on a craggy cliff, where only a handful of ascetic monks keep solitary vigil. Mainstream historical fact: Hermetic monasticism in Ethiopia dates to the 4th century, inspired by Egyptian desert fathers seeking spiritual solitude. Here, butter clocks evolve into personalized prayer companions, each device a reflection of its keeper's devotion. You probably won't survive a night here without embracing solitude, and maybe a stiff prayer, yet the hush itself feels alive, humming with remembered drips. The small chamber is lit by a single butter lamp resting on a carved wooden altar. Its bowl is irregularly shaped, molded from local volcanic rock rather than crafted brass. You lean in, sensing the bowl's porous texture absorbing heat differently. Each drip here carries volcanic warmth. Sensory detail: the smoky aroma of basalt mingles with melted yak butter, creating an earthy incense that anchors you to the hermit's world. Brother Gevre, the hermitage's sole occupant, greets you with a nod, his face framed by a long, white beard. He points to his butter clock, a volcanic bowl perched on a simple stone stand, its drip nozzle fashioned from hollowed bone. A fringe tidbit: he claims the bone nozzle tunes drips to the hermitage's natural resonance, like a musical instrument played by gravity. Historians still argue whether bone nozzles were common or purely symbolic, but here, in this chamber, the effect is undeniable. Each plink echoes like a distant drum beat. As you sit cross-legged on a woven mat, Brother Gevre speaks softly of his ritual. Each morning, he crumbles a pinch of local herbs, wild rosemary and juniper, into the melted butter, believing their aromatic oils stabilize drip rate. You inhale the herbal spiced fat, tasting piney bite and buttery warmth. Sensory detail: the herb's resinous edge grounds your thoughts, anchoring you more firmly than any modern mindfulness app. He demonstrates by pouring a fresh ladle of hot butter into the bowl. You watch as the first drop forms, trembling at the nozzle's lip before falling plink. You note its timing against your own heartbeat, which slows in response. In this solitary context, a butter clock transforms into an intimate heartbeat mirror rather than communal pulse. You smirk, joke one, who knew butter could sync your aura? Throughout the day, Brother Gevre alternates between silent meditation and drip monitoring. He tracks each drip in a small parchment journal, recording the intervals with delicate Guizi numerals. A fringe scholar once surmised that hermits like Gebre contributed to early Ethiopian chronography by melding personal mysticism with empirical observation. Historians still argue whether these journals influenced regional timekeeping or remained hermetic curiosities. As high noon approaches, the hermitage's open window frames a panorama of valley below. Sunlight slants in, accelerating the butter's melt. Gebre pins a small cloth shade carved from goat leather over the lamp to temper the heat. You smell goat hide mingled with butter, a rustic scent that seems to carry centuries of devotion. Sensory detail: the sun-warmed leather feels smooth under your fingertips, while a mist of sweat beads on your brow. An hour later, you return to find the bowl nearly empty. Gebre has marked the last strips as labored hours, a term he uses for extended midday meditation. He explains that on particularly hot days, the drip slows enough to allow him to complete longer prayers without interruption. You realize this adaptation blends environmental factors into spiritual practice, timekeeping and contemplation inseparable. Before dusk, Gebre offers you a small flake of local rock salt. He sprinkles it into the melting butter and invites you to observe the effect. You watch as the salt crystals sink, subtly altering viscosity and causing irregular drips, some quicker, some slower. A fringe note. Hermits believed salt's purifying essence lent their prayers extra potency, despite the drop variability it introduced. You chuckle, joke too, spice up your prayer life, add salt. As twilight deepens, Gebre lights a second lamp fueled by termite-hollowed acacia resin, its richer aroma blending with the butter lamp's scent. He arranges both to drip onto a shared catchment, their streams intertwining like braided melodies. You lean forward, inhaling the complex incense of fat, resin, herb, and salt, a sensory tapestry richer than any incense mix in the main monastery. This intimate duet of drips marks the hermit's evening prayer, a personal psalm the world never hears. You rise to stretch, feeling the hermitage's solitude pulse through you. Gebre offers parting wisdom: in solitude, time is not a tyrant but a companion. Each drip reminds me to listen. You blink away a memory of market bustle and scholarly debate. This is a different world, where butter clocks measure inner rhythms rather than communal order. You step back into the dusky corridor linking hermitages, carrying Gebre's whispered mantra with you. Behind you, the hermitage's single lamp glows like a steadfast heart in the dark. Ahead lies the monastery's collective hive again, but you know its monks trace their shared time from moments like these. Personal, slow drips that anchor their souls. With one final glance at the hermitage door, you press forward, your footsteps echoing like distant drips in the silent passage. And you realize that even in isolation, time drips on liquid, vital, and deeply human. You return to the main cloister just as a strange new contraption arrives by mule cart, a glossy, imported mechanical clock, its brass gears gleaming under canvas. It's 1912, and Ethiopia's Emperor Menelik II has ordered timepieces from Europe. Mainstream historical fact: mechanical clocks began appearing in Ethiopian city halls and churches in the early 20th century. You probably won't survive the ensuing culture clash if you try to smuggle a butter lamp past customs, but hey, consider this the dawn of the age of gears. The mechanical clock is installed next to the ancient butter clocks in the monastery's refectory. Its pendulum swings with silent precision, marking seconds that tick by imperceptibly fast compared to the butter's languid drips. Monks gather around, robes fluttering like banners in a gentle breeze, their devotion unchanged even as their tools evolve. A quirky fringe tidbit: one senior monk quipped that the mechanical clock tells time, but cannot taste it, lamenting the loss of buttery aroma in favor of cold metal. Historians still argue whether this jest was jest or genuine critique of mechanization's impact on spiritual rhythm. As weeks pass, you observe how the new clock slowly supplants butter lamps for communal prayer scheduling. The sharp tick-tock becomes the refectory's new heartbeat, and butter clocks are relegated to museum shelves behind glass. Sensory detail: you hear the metallic click of gears, feel the absence of warm lamp glow, and sense a subtle emptiness in the refectory's air. No more plink-plink guiding your breath. Yet, butter clocks don't vanish entirely. A handful of traditionalists, like Brother Yared in his third decade of service, keep one lamp lit beside their cells. He insists the tactile drip connects him to centuries of devotion. You catch a whiff of rancid butter one evening as you pass his doorway, just enough to remind you of the past's sticky embrace. Joke one flits through your mind: old habits melt hard. In the marketplace below, artisans start crafting decorative butter clock replicas in wood and clay for tourists and pilgrims. They paint them bright blues and reds, embellishing spouts with fanciful animal motifs: lions, eagles, and mythical ibex. A fringe collector once claimed these replicas capture the soul of time, though skeptics dismissed them as kitsch. Historians still argue whether this folk reinterpretation preserves genuine heritage or commercializes sacred tools. You grin at the sight of a painted ibex spout and wonder if it drips faster on Tuesdays. By mid-century, as Addis Ababa hums with modernization, butter clocks are seldom seen beyond museum exhibits and scholarly articles. You wander through the National Museum, tracing display placards that describe butter lamps as religious curiosities and artifacts of monastic ingenuity. Sensory detail: the museum's polished tile floors echo your footsteps, its climate-controlled halls smell of antiseptic, and butter clock glass cases reflect bright spotlights instead of flickering flame. Still, the legacy endures in unexpected ways. In rural highlands, you find small shrines where farmers honor the butter saints by offering little pats of butter on stone altars, a grassroots ritual echoing monastic practice. They believe these offerings ensure rain on parched fields. A fringe anthropologist wrote that these ceremonies influenced modern Ethiopian meteorology folklore. Historians still argue if these shrines predate 20th century butter clock decline or emerged afterward as nostalgic revival. You marvel at how a monastic timekeeper faded into agrarian deity. In urban art circles, painters incorporate the butter clock motif into vibrant canvases. You attend a gallery opening in Addis, where abstract works swirl with golden drips against deep reds. Artists explain that butter clocks symbolize time's fluid memory, a poetic nod to history's ebb and flow. Sensory detail: you taste the faint bitterness of coffee spiked with cardamom, hear jazz-inflected Ethiopian melodies, and feel the gallery's cool AC replacing the monastery's drafty chill. You nod appreciatively, joking privately: art school sure knows how to butter you up. Contemporary sculptors, too, play with the theme. You visit a public plaza where a large metal sculpture mimics a dripping butter lamp, molten bronze frozen mid-drip. Children scamper beneath its arching streams, giggling as they imagine it raining gold. Fringe debates abound. Is this public art a meaningful tribute or an over-literal gimmick? Historians still argue whether such modern installations honor monastic ingenuity or trivialize sacred traditions. In university classrooms, you listen as a professor lectures on the butter clock's role in shaping Ethiopian concepts of temporality. She argues that butter lamps fostered a felt time, where hours are lived rather than measured, an idea gaining traction in global time studies. A fringe thesis recently claimed butter clock philosophy influenced 21st century mindfulness apps, though some scholars call it overreach. You grin at the notion of a buttery-combed meditation soundtrack. Every February, a handful of monasteries host butter clock heritage days. They relight ancient lamps, demonstrate drip calibration, and invite locals to try timing verses of psalms. You wander through one such event at Debra Baran Selassie Church, where monks guide visitors through calibration drills, piping laughter mixing with sacred chants. Sensory detail, the air is thick with incense and butter aroma, laughter echoes off frescoed ceilings, and your hands catch warm stray drips. You think, maybe history drips a little slower when shared. At a remote art residency, you meet an Ethiopian-American poet who writes verses inspired by butter clock's liquid temporality. She recites lines that weave dripping fat with memory and longing, each drop a breath / each pause a grief undone. You feel a lump in your throat, joke too, poetry hits you like a pat of butter on hot toast. Finally, you discover that modern Ethiopian watchmakers sometimes embed tiny seal-shaped butter clock symbols on luxury watch dials, a nod to national heritage. You peer at one in a boutique, a miniature spout near the numeral 6, dripping. Well, it doesn't drip, but the design gleams with nostalgic pride. Fringe critics claim it's mere branding, historians smile, seeing continuity. You smirk, even high-end watches need a little grease. As you stand at the monastery's gate one last time, you glance back at the silent row of butter lamps gathering dust on a low shelf. You remember their warm glow, the soft plinks, and the communal heartbeat they once sustained. Their decline was inevitable. Time marches forward, years supplanting drips, but their legacy flows in art, ritual, and memory. And you realize that human ingenuity persists. Whether measured by melted butter, swinging pendulums, or digital ticks, time remains our most intimate companion. You step forward into the highland dawn, the scent of rain and sage filling your lungs. Ahead lies the final chapter, where ghosts of buttery hours linger in empty chapels and quiet museums. But for now, you carry those golden droplets in your mind, each one a testament to faith, creativity, and the sweet persistence of tradition. You step through the moss-covered archway of the abandoned chapel at dawn, sunlight slanting through shattered stained glass fragments. Mainstream historical fact: many Ethiopian chapels fell into disuse during the 20th century church reforms that centralized worship in larger cathedrals. The air is cool and still, carrying only the faintest echo of once chanted hymns. You probably won't survive long in the damp silence without tripping over a moldering pew, but there's something sacred in this hushed decay. Inside, rows of empty butter lamp brackets line the walls like silent sentinels. You run your fingers along cold iron, feeling residual butter encrusted into crevices. Sensory detail, the waxy texture scraped under your nail releases a musty, tangy scent that drifts into your lungs. Each bracket once held a lamp that dripped fat in unison, calling monks to prayer. Now, only silence drips in its place. At the altar, you find a solitary brass bowl, its surface mottled with verdigris. You lift it gently and detect a faint imprint of a notch near the rim, the single remaining marker from centuries past. A quirky tidbit: local legend says that if you press your ear to a rusty lamp bracket here, you can still hear the phantom plink of butter drops. though skeptics argue it's just wind in the broken windows. You press your ear anyway. Joke 1. Best ASMR experience ever, no headphones required. You move toward the carved stone floor, noticing triangular drip stains that have seeped into the mortar. Each stain is like a fossilized heartbeat, marking moments of shared devotion now fossilized in stone. Fringe scholars debate whether these patterns can be used to reconstruct ancient monastic schedules or if they're simply random corrosion. You crouch to examine one stain, letting the chapel's chill seep through your knees. Along the side wall, faded frescoes depict angels holding butter lamps, their wings painted in soft pastels almost worn away. You brush your thumb across a faint wingtip, sensory detail. The chalky paint flutters into your palm like medieval dandruff. Historians still argue whether these frescoes were original or later Baroque additions. Art restorers are split on whether to stabilize them or let them vanish gracefully. You imagine a modern conservator whispering, "Butter lamps or bust." At the far end, a collapsed lectern spills shards of manuscript pages onto the floor. You gingerly pick up a fragment, reading a bleached Guizi script that references the golden tears of our vigil. A fringe tidbit notes that some chapels banned butter clocks entirely, seeing them as distractions. These fragments may be from a banned batch of liturgical texts. You smirk. Joke 2. Puritan monks, butterphobes since the 12th century. The chapel's small courtyard is overgrown with thyme and sage, herbs once used to scent butter clocks. You pluck a sprig, crush it between your fingers, and inhale a burst of sweet, herbal perfume. Sensory detail, the herb's bright aroma cuts through damp stone, reminding you of herb-infused butter clocks in remote hermitages. You tuck the sprig behind your ear, an accidental homage to bygone rituals. Leaning against the crumbling wall, you notice a half-buried butter lampstand made of volcanic stone. It's chipped and scarred, but its nozzle still holds shape. You wonder, did a novice hide it here during a late-night raid? Fringe debate. Some say monks hid these clocks to protect them from reformers. Others insist abandonment was voluntary, a symbolic relinquishing of old ways. You imagine a cloister of monks tiptoeing outside at midnight, secret lamps in hand. Joke 3. Monastic flash mobs, the original covert worship. As you prepare to leave, you pause at the threshold, sunlight casting long shadows through fractured arches. You sense the ghosts of drips past each drop, once a pulse in a living community of prayer. The chapel's silence feels alive, as if the stones themselves remember the golden flow. You breathe deeply, tasting cool air and faint butter tang, feeling the weight of centuries in every inhale. Stepping back into the highland mist, you carry the chapel's quiet imprint in your mind. The echoes of buttered hours linger like a soft refrain, inviting you to remember that even when tools vanish, the human need to measure and sanctify time endures, one silent stone, one fossilized drip at a time. You walk the winding path back to the main monastery at first light, dew-laden grass whispering beneath your feet. Mainstream historical fact: Ethiopian monastic complexes often include concentric paths for meditation walks known as mescal steps, dating back to the 5th century. The rising sun filters through mist, painting the highland valley in pale gold. You probably won't survive this journey if you don't pause for breath, but this morning's hush feels like a final butter clock tick of reflection. Aurora's glow reveals the row of lamps in the corridor, each bowl still faintly sticky from last night's vigil. You reach out, running your palm over cooled butter residue. Sensory detail, the cold tackiness grips your skin, a last tactile link to the night's drips. You savor the moment, knowing it's the closing act before the day's first prayer. Inside the chapel, the novice choir gathers for lauds. You take a seat in the back pew, the wooden bench carved with century-old drip stains. The novices light new butter lamps, and as the bowls fill, you sense a cyclical rebirth. Fringe tidbit: some monks schedule their personal watches by the first 3 drips of dawn lamps, believing them especially auspicious. You listen for the plinks 1, 2, 3, and feel the monastery stir awake. The head cantor steps forward, and the choir's voices rise in a gentle crescendo. Butter lamps blink behind them like terrestrial stars. Each drip falls in silent counterpoint to the melody, weaving rhythm into song. You close your eyes, letting the ancient chant in golden drips guide your breath. Sensory detail: the scent of fresh butter, the rustle of choir robes, the warmth of candlelight kissing your cheeks. After the final stanza, you rise for the morning procession. Monks file out in 2 lines, butter lamp in hand, moving toward the courtyard. You join them, feeling the murmur of prayer beneath your robes. The highland breeze carries soft echoes of Dominus Vobiscum as you step into the light. At the fountain courtyard, each monk places their lamp on stone pedestals carved with drip grooves. You help settle your bowl into its groove, feeling its gentle tilt. The novices watch expectantly, ready to count the first drips towards prime. You stand at the edge, heart steady, awaiting the gentle plink that marks time's return. A lone drop falls, then another. The chorus of drips blends with birdsong and the distant ring of a bronze bell. Sensory detail: the layered soundtrack of nature and devotion. You smile, remembering how this journey began with a single drip in a dawn-lit corridor. Here it comes full circle, the ancient and the immediate merging in a living rhythm. You step aside as the procession fades into the chapel, leaving you alone with the lamps. You move among them, tracing each golden meniscus, feeling the pulse of communal time beneath your fingertips. You note how even the smallest chip or irregular drip is part of a larger design, one shaped by faith, ingenuity, and the sheer desire to know, at each moment, where we stand in the unfolding day. You take a final breath of highland air, cool and clear, and turn away from the flickering lamps. Ahead lies your own path, shaped by the hours you've witnessed and the silent drips you've carried within you. You step onto the outer walkway, ready to rejoin the world beyond these walls, but with your heartbeat tuned to the monastery's buttery cadence. Word count before wind down: 730, 300 word wind down time here isn't measured in ticking seconds but in the gentle release of molten butter, each drop an invitation to linger in the present moment. The hush of the highland dawn, the lingering aroma of simmered fat, and the rhythmic plinks of lamps converge into a meditation on impermanence. As the day unfolds beyond these walls, you carry the monastery's quiet heartbeat in your own chest. Let your thoughts drift like bees over dew-kissed grass, unfurling without rush. Imagine each butter drop as a promise that even in life's bustling pace, there's sanctuary in slowing down. Recall the taste of herbed fat on your tongue, the warmth of lamps on your palms, the hushed chorus of drips echoing in stone halls. Each memory softens the edges of worry, drawing you back to a tranquil center where time is not a master but a gentle guide. Rest now in the knowledge that tomorrow brings new drips, new rhythms, and fresh moments of grace. In the silent spaces between plinks, find your breath, your heartbeat, and your quiet resolve. Let the golden cadence of melted butter lull your mind toward stillness, and may your dreams be as soft and sustained as those monastic vigil hours. You step through the moss-covered archway of the abandoned chapel at dawn, sunlight slanting through shattered stained glass fragments. Mainstream historical fact: many Ethiopian chapels fell into disuse during the 20th century church reforms that centralized worship in larger cathedrals. The air is cool and still, carrying only the faintest echo of once chanted hymns. You probably won't survive long in the damp silence without tripping over a moldering pew, but there's something sacred in this hushed decay. Inside, rows of empty butter lamp brackets line the walls like silent sentinels. You run your fingers along cold iron, feeling residual butter encrusted into crevices. Sensory detail: the waxy texture scraped under your nail releases a musty, tangy scent that drifts into your lungs. Each bracket once held a lamp that dripped fat in unison, calling monks to prayer. Now, only silence drips in its place. At the altar, you find a solitary brass bowl, its surface mottled with verdigris. You lift it gently and detect a faint imprint of a notch near the rim, the single remaining marker from centuries past. A quirky tidbit: local legend says that if you press your ear to a rusty lamp bracket here, you can still hear the phantom plink of butter drops. Though skeptics argue it's just wind in the broken windows. You press your ear anyway. Joke 1: best ASMR experience ever, no headphones required. You move toward the carved stone floor, noticing triangular drip stains that have seeped into the mortar. Each stain is like a fossilized heartbeat, marking moments of shared devotion now fossilized in stone. Fringe scholars debate whether these patterns can be used to reconstruct ancient monastic schedules or if they're simply random corrosion. You crouch to examine one stain, letting the chapel's chill seep through your knees. Along the side wall, faded frescoes depict angels holding butter lamps, their wings painted in soft pastels almost worn away. You brush your thumb across a faint wingtip. Sensory detail: the chalky paint flutters into your palm like medieval dandruff. Historians still argue whether these frescoes were original or later Baroque additions. Art restorers are split on whether to stabilize them or let them vanish gracefully. You imagine a modern conservator whispering, "Butter lamps or bust." At the far end, a collapsed lectern spills shards of manuscript pages onto the floor. You gingerly pick up a fragment, reading a bleached Guizi script that references the golden tears of our vigil. A fringe tidbit notes that some chapels banned butter clocks entirely, seeing them as distractions. These fragments may be from a banned batch of liturgical texts. You smirk. Joke 2: Puritan monks, butterphobes since the 12th century. The chapel's small courtyard is overgrown with thyme and sage, herbs once used to scent butter clocks. You pluck a sprig, crush it between your fingers, and inhale a burst of sweet, herbal perfume. Sensory detail: the herb's bright aroma cuts through damp stone, reminding you of herb-infused butter clocks in remote hermitages. You tuck the sprig behind your ear, an accidental homage to bygone rituals. Leaning against the crumbling wall, you notice a half-buried butter lamp stand made of volcanic stone. It's chipped and scarred, but its nozzle still holds shape. You wonder, did a novice hide it here during a late-night raid? Fringe debate: some say monks hid these clocks to protect them from reformers. Others insist abandonment was voluntary, a symbolic relinquishing of old ways. You imagine a cloister of monks tiptoeing outside at midnight, secret lamps in hand. Joke 3: monastic flash mobs, the original covert worship. As you prepare to leave, you pause at the threshold, sunlight casting long shadows through fractured arches. You sense the ghosts of drips past each drop, once a pulse in a living community of prayer. The chapel's silence feels alive, as if the stones themselves remember the golden flow. You breathe deeply, tasting cool air and faint butter tang, feeling the weight of centuries in every inhale. Stepping back into the highland mist, you carry the chapel's quiet imprint in your mind. The echoes of buttered hours linger like a soft refrain, inviting you to remember that even when tools vanish, the human need to measure and sanctify time endures, one silent stone, one fossilized drip at a time. You walk the winding path back to the main monastery at first light, dew-laden grass whispering beneath your feet. Mainstream historical fact: Ethiopian monastic complexes often include concentric paths for meditation walks known as mescal steps, dating back to the 5th century. The rising sun filters through mist, painting the highland valley in pale gold. You probably won't survive this journey if you don't pause for breath, but this morning's hush feels like a final butter clock tick of reflection. Aurora's glow reveals the row of lamps in the corridor, each bowl still faintly sticky from last night's vigil. You reach out, running your palm over cooled butter residue. Sensory detail: the cold tackiness grips your skin, a last tactile link to the night's drips. You savor the moment, knowing it's the closing act before the day's first prayer. Inside the chapel, the novice choir gathers for lauds. You take a seat in the back pew, the wooden bench carved with century-old drip stains. The novices light new butter lamps, and as the bowls fill, you sense a cyclical rebirth. Fringe tidbit: some monks schedule their personal watches by the first 3 drips of dawn lamps, believing them especially auspicious. You listen for the plinks 1, 2, 3, and feel the monastery stir awake. The head cantor steps forward, and the choir's voices rise in a gentle crescendo. Butter lamps blink behind them like terrestrial stars. Each drip falls in silent counterpoint to the melody, weaving rhythm into song. You close your eyes, letting the ancient chant and golden drips guide your breath. Sensory detail: the scent of fresh butter, the rustle of choir robes, the warmth of candlelight kissing your cheeks. After the final stanza, you rise for the morning procession. Monks file out in 2 lines, butter lamp in hand, moving toward the courtyard. You join them, feeling the murmur of prayer beneath your robes. The highland breeze carries soft echoes of Dominus Vobiscum as you step into the light. At the fountain courtyard, each monk places their lamp on stone pedestals carved with drip grooves. You help settle your bowl into its groove, feeling its gentle tilt. The novices watch expectantly, ready to count the first drips towards prime. You stand at the edge, heart steady, awaiting the gentle plink that marks time's return. A lone drop falls, then another. The chorus of drips blends with birdsong and the distant ring of a bronze bell. Sensory detail: the layered soundtrack of nature and devotion. You smile, remembering how this journey began with a single drip in a dawn-lit corridor. Here it comes full circle, the ancient and the immediate merging in a living rhythm. You step aside as the procession fades into the chapel, leaving you alone with the lamps. You move among them, tracing each golden meniscus, feeling the pulse of communal time beneath your fingertips. You note how even the smallest chip or irregular drip is part of a larger design, one shaped by faith, ingenuity, and the sheer desire to know, at each moment, where we stand in the unfolding day. You take a final breath of highland air, cool and clear, and turn away from the flickering lamps. Ahead lies your own path, shaped by the hours you've witnessed and the silent drips you've carried within you. You step onto the outer walkway, ready to rejoin the world beyond these walls, but with your heartbeat tuned to the monastery's buttery cadence. Word count before wind down, 730, 300 word wind down time here isn't measured in ticking seconds but in the gentle release of molten butter, each drop an invitation to linger in the present moment. The hush of the highland dawn, the lingering aroma of simmered fat, and the rhythmic plinks of lamps converge into a meditation on impermanence. As the day unfolds beyond these walls, you carry the monastery's quiet heartbeat in your own chest. Let your thoughts drift like bees over dew-kissed grass, unfurling without rush. Imagine each butter drop as a promise that even in life's bustling pace, there's sanctuary in slowing down. Recall the taste of herbed fat on your tongue, the warmth of lamps on your palms, the hushed chorus of drips echoing in stone halls. Each memory softens the edges of worry, drawing you back to a tranquil center where time is not a master but a gentle guide. Rest now in the knowledge that tomorrow brings new drips, new rhythms, and fresh moments of grace. In the silent spaces between plinks, find your breath, your heartbeat, and your quiet resolve. Let the golden cadence of melted butter lull your mind toward stillness, and may your dreams be as soft and sustained as those monastic vigil hours.